You're watching Open Agenda. Here's our host, Joe White.
Welcome to Open Agenda. I'm your host, Joe White. In this episode, we're going to take some time to discuss the financial audit from 24 and how it relates to the fiscal year 26 budget that is actually starting now. In order to do that, I brought in a couple guests, Mr. Bob Taylor, former county council attorney from Wicomico County, Dr. Joe Venosa. Thanks for coming in, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Hello.
So, look, we're getting a lot of information at one time. And sometimes when you get a lot of information, it's hard to kind of parse through all the minutia. The bottom line is, over the next 60 days, the county executive who just did submit the financial audit for 26, and that covers July 1st, 25, all the way to June 30th of 26. That just got turned in, the proposal. Over the next 60 days, we're going to have several hearings, budget hearings, also some other open work sessions. So let's go through this. I mean, really, we need to start by really wrapping up the financial audit from 24, which we just did get that information 2 weeks ago. So, Bob, I mean, give us some of the highlights. I mean, you've gone through.
It's about 160 pages long. I haven't read all of them, but I'm used to the format for these. I've looked at the financial statements for many years, and I can kind of go and get some quick numbers out of it. Here's a brief overview. For revenue, the final budget for that year was $183 million and change. It came in new revenue at $209 million. Now that's about a $26 million surplus, if you want to call it that. On the expenditure side, the final budget called for $171 million and change in expenses. They only expended $155.5 million, so that's another $16 million surplus. To put those together, that's over $42 million of surplus.
Okay.
Most businesses, if they spend $155 million and their profit's $42 million, are going to feel pretty good.
They're pretty happy, yeah.
It's not quite that good though. It was a good year,
yeah.
But maybe not quite as very good as makes it look that way.
So,
and that's because
let's talk about why.
Well, one of the main reasons, just in looking at an overview, is $30 million came out of the general fund that's not listed as expenditure. Most of that was from the prior year surplus.
Okay.
We have an existing surplus.
Yeah, they
it's
carried over from...
it's about $85 million.
Okay.
And some of that goes into the budget, and then it gets paid out if you have more revenue than you've expected. So you take out about $30 million. If you take it off of that $42 million, you have about $11 million left. And if you look at in the financial statement, if you look at the balance sheet for the general fund, we're only talking now about the general fund. So that went up last year by about $23 million. But if you adjust for that use of prior year revenue, you really have about $10.5 million, and that was the amount that the unassigned, that's your real true savings account, went up. Now, just so everybody knows, there's also a rainy day fund. That's not included in the unassigned balance. That's, I think, between $5 and $10 million. Believe it or not, the financial statement does not say how much the rainy day fund is. Don't know why that is, but I mean, most people, I think, would want to know.
I would want to know, not because we hope to spend it, but just so you make sure that it's still there,
Yeah,
right?
so realistically, June 30 of 24, a little over a year and a half ago, roughly, we had about $85 million unassigned and another 5 or so in the rainy day fund, and perhaps some others, because I don't know how they categorize everything in the general fund. I'd have to have more detailed information. But I think it's fair to say there's at least $90 million when you include the rainy day fund back then.
Now, why do you think the revenues were so much higher for fiscal year 24 than what was budgeted? I mean, there's 3 major categories, right?
That's interesting.
Okay.
Just to get into the weeds on that, the income tax revenue was $77 million and change. That's about $6.5–7 million more than it was the year before.
But also about $13 million more than they budgeted.
Exactly.
Right?
It's about $13 million more than they budgeted, because for some reason they budgeted the amount of revenue they thought they would get at what was less than what was collected the year before.
And really almost what was
Yeah.
less than the year before that.
That's right.
I mean, why would you? I mean, do you have
I can't answer that question.
Okay.
That's, it's above my pay grade. But anyway, that's a major factor. Now there are a couple others. One is the investment earnings were way up. Interest rates went up. So they had only budgeted that at I think $4,800,000. That came in at $10.2 million. So that was about a $5.5 million surplus.
And that's from the state of Maryland, their municipal fund that we've always been a part of.
yeah,
Went up 2% just because interest rates were higher.
and
right?
interest rates were higher than they had been.
It wasn't anything that anybody necessarily did at this point. but
Yeah, I mean, it's a tremendous increase. Just to give you a rough overview, in FY21, 3 years ago before this, the total investment earnings were less than $100,000.
Wow. Interest rates were low.
Now it was 10.2.
Yeah.
That's a 100-fold increase.
Yeah.
That's
There's
two
more
order-
money in the account.
2 orders of
And
magnitude.
the interest rates are higher.
Yeah, higher. So that was good. The other big jump was in the intergovernmental, it's classified as. That's really grants from the state, primarily government.
And some of that was COVID money still
some-
actually being realized,
and,
right?
and state and federal.
Yeah.
And the federal part, of course, was COVID.
Yeah, and they
we're-
did explain that's always been there, but they can't realize it on the balance sheet until it's spent, and it wasn't spent until fiscal year 24.
Well, and not only that, I think most of that COVID money had a deadline of the end of the year 24 when it had to either be spent or committed.
Yeah,
So that money is going away. I'm not sure that it's totally gone away.
we can't count on that anymore.
Well, we can count maybe on a small part of it. This we have to get into the weeds on.
Yeah.
But certainly not anywhere close to the $12 million that we got.
On the flip side, you mentioned earlier that there was a lot less expenses. What were the major areas that they didn't spend the money
Okay.
on?
In that instance, most of the underspending was the Department of Public Works.
Okay,
That was about $2 million less than budgeted.
okay,
I don't know all the answers. I know part of it was because we didn't have a department head.
yeah. There was some
That's part of
salaries,
it, but I don't know. This should be looked at.
No, it was interesting
it's-
because
yeah.
just at the April 15th meeting, the Public Works that has a department head now, they just came before the county council and said, look, we need $2.3 million. We need it today so that we can remove the old spoils out of the Sharps Point facility
Well,
for the new dredging.
maybe to put the expenditure in broader overview, though, it was about $155 million. That was about a little over $5 million more than the prior year. Now, most of the overage of that $5 million and plus was the sheriff, the fire department, or fire services, I should say, not department, and all other departments of the county government.
Okay.
In other words, excluding education, corrections, sheriff, fire, blah, blah, blah. So that's where the $5 million of extra spending came from. The biggest decrease by far was the public works. That was $2 million. So that's a rough overview of it. But the long and short of it is the $155 million that was spent was much less than the $171 million that was budgeted.
So, Joe-
all the departments look like they're somewhat over budgeted. Just look like it. I can't say without looking item by item.
Yeah.
But you get the feel when you look at that much of a difference.
So, Joe, you've been very vocal about the need to fund the Board of Education at maintenance of effort plus the additional that they've asked.
Not only that, I think the maintenance of effort itself is, as I think you've indicated too, itself is pretty paltry compared to other counties.
Yeah.
Well, and I don't want to get into the debate about other counties because it comes to state.
Short answer, yes.
Okay. Well, all right. A month ago, 30 short days ago,
Yeah.
the county executives having hearings. Now, this is before the financial audit of 24,
Sure.
which came out 4 months late.
Right, but ostensibly they knew this.
They had to have known this.
They had to have known this, yeah.
Unless the numbers were just non-existent to them, which is scary in itself.
Sure.
We're having a conversation just 30 days ago about raising taxes.
Right.
So maybe it is time to look at the revenue cap, and is it the best policy? Is it the best thing? And
And now here we stand,
We're all-
and Bob is discussing, anywhere from 10.5 million to $42 million discrepancy in what was budgeted and what was brought in.
Yeah.
Are you glad your taxes aren't going up?
I am, but I'm also worried about why it was framed in that way to begin with.
Yeah. Is there an ulterior motive? Is there ultimately it's just about money?
It's always about money with certain local officials, but I know that might surprise some of you, but ultimately this was about framing a political issue for the future, because ultimately it's the goal of the county executive and certain members of the business community and some people on the council or may be on the council that want to get rid of the revenue cap, and they tend to not look at what we have and use it rather than say, well, we really need to get rid of it so that we have it. And again, I'm a big supporter of public education. I think it does need to be drastically increased for a lot of things, although not necessarily some of the things that the blueprint is calling for. But nevertheless, I'm a big champion of it, always will be. But those two things are mutually exclusive.
They're not necessarily attached at the hip.
Not at all.
And just as Bob pointed out a few minutes ago, $11.5 million in actual surplus from fiscal year 24 that's going to roll up into 25, which we're in 25 now. And having the revenue cap is keeping $9 million in the local private sector.
That is one of the biggest points of the revenue cap. It put $9 million in our county residents' pockets.
For people to spend on groceries and, providing for their children.
Well, God knows the cost of those things are going to go up anyway with what we're seeing. So I think, again, it's probably knowing that, again, let's assume these numbers are correct and that they hold. I think that gives us all the more reason. I mean, if you want a great defense of why we should keep the revenue cap.
Bob, what other thoughts do you have on the financial audit that just came out a couple weeks ago? I mean, is there any other takeaways that you have? But
now, there is one thing, though.
Okay.
There is a department that was way over.
Okay.
That was the law department.
Of course.
That was up by about 25% over what was budgeted.
And how much is that?
100 and some thousand.
Okay.
Now,
Well, is that maybe the county executive?
I'm almost certain that was the
To
To be
lawsuit.
fair, they're getting a lot of extra work these
Yeah,
days,
yeah,
so
yeah.
it would seem.
Most of the trial in the circuit court was in fiscal year 24.
Okay.
The appeal was this year in Annapolis.
Okay.
So it's split between the 2 years.
And you're talking about the Matt Leitzel confirmation.
Correct,
and,
yeah.
And the amount of money that the executive spent to sue us.
Well,
to
sue the
ourselves.
council. Sue the council,
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, for the regular person out there who does not want to get line item by line item, and most people don't, the three main takeaways were that there was revenues that were underestimated, expenses that were overestimated, and then there also was some government grant money that still flowed through for 24. Really, ultimately, what we want to get at is what do folks need to know for this spring? Because the springtime, this next 60 days is when we're going to decide our budget for the next year.
Well, okay, I would look at it two ways. First of all, they need to get pro forma information on this year, FY25. The county should have that, and you can compare your receipts and your expenses to what they were at this time a year ago.
I mean, a trend.
Yeah, you can get a pretty, you've been in business.
Hey, in the
it
business
follows.
world, cash flow and trends are huge.
And you can see those by comparative data.
It almost sounds like you're talking about a quarterly report.
Yeah, or monthly.
If we were a $200 million private entity,
Right.
we would have quarterly reports, wouldn't we?
Well, and I will say something.
You want one?
In this year's budget, there's the very last page, and this is the first time they've put it in the proposed budget, is kind of a reconciliation of what's going to happen to the general fund balance.
Well, I tell you what.
And that's a good table to have. We can get into that.
Let's take a break, and when we come back, let's kind of tee up. Now, I think we're finally putting fiscal year 24 to bed. Thank goodness.
yeah.
We feels like we've begged and asked for this now for 4 or 5 months. We're moving beyond that, but we're jumping right into. Unfortunately, since it was so late, we're jumping right into the next year.
Well, and this is why it would be good to get the financial statement much earlier.
Yeah.
So you don't have it right on the back of your next year's budget.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, stay with us. When we come back, we're going to start to set the table for the financial or the fiscal year 26 budget. That those hearings are going to be in May and June this year. So stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Open Agenda. I'm your host, Joe White. in this segment, we're going to spend some more time with Bob Taylor and Joe Venosa. And we're going to start to really pick apart just the process and maybe some of the information you want to gather for the fiscal year 26 budget. So thank you, gentlemen, for sticking around in the studio.
Thank you.
So, Joe, I mean, you and I the last 2 months have covered the budget hearings, the public hearings. Even back in November, we covered the CIP where our appointed delegate, Barry Beecham, wanted to know which of us were ready to
Pay a little bit more in taxes.
pay more in taxes with raking the revenue cap.
Good evening, Barry Beecham, county resident. And as far as I guess the elephant in the room here, everybody's talking about, we need funds, and the funds are lack thereof. I'd say the elephant in the room is the tax cap. And I'm just curious, how many people here would be willing to have their property taxes raised? To support any property, because and that's really what we need to really look at. And for me to say, hey, I'm in favor, of a tax increase, no one wants to hear that. But the problem is that we don't have enough money to fund these.
As Bob has said, we're finding that we're under budgeted.
Seems like it's working pretty well.
It seems like it's going okay, and maybe even we need to do a better job budgeting. I mean, it's been a couple years of underestimating, how do we know if we're doing the right thing if we don't know where we're at?
Yep.
What's the most important aspect you hope to get out of the next, say, two council meetings when we're having these budget hearings?
Well, I'd like to get a sense of what the priorities, obviously, of the executive's office are, because that, like it or not, that does drive a lot of the narrative and a lot of the vision of the county. Mm-hmm. And I would also like to get a good sense as to ultimately, from my perspective, what kinds of resources are we investing in that help the county's quality of life and growth, but don't put us on a track where we're depleting resources down the road with things that aren't sustainable.
Okay. So, Bob, I mean, kind of same question to you. You're very educated in this process. What do you expect? What questions do you think the council will be asking, and what should maybe the public be asking?
Well, first thing I think it would be good to point out, we got a couple of good surprises in this coming budget.
Okay.
One is we get about $3 million more for our disparity grant.
Okay.
That apparently was a last-minute deal
we
in
thought
Annapolis.
it was going to be flat, which was lower than the.
Well, there were
before.
fears that it would be gone.
Well,
there
but
was.
I think that
maybe
was
unfounded, but there was.
Yeah.
But in any event, that's going to be up about $3 million.
Okay.
And we also found that we do not have to forward fund the Fruitland School.
At least for fiscal year 26.
Yeah, that's right.
It
At least
still might come up in 27.
It could come up, but there's about a $5 million difference there.
Now, how does that happen? Can you explain that to Joe Public?
I wish I could.
Actually,
The short answer is this is Maryland.
Well, Director of Finance Pam Olin at the April 15th meeting, she gave her explanation. Okay. And basically what I think she's saying is, one, the state of Maryland is releasing more of the funds in fiscal year 26 than they initially told the county.
I see.
At one point it was $5 million only out of the $26 million they were supposed to do. Now it's 12.
Okay.
And because of the construction timeline, they won't be, quote unquote, out of money during the process of construction while we're still in fiscal year 26. The school won't be completed until fiscal year 27. There was always going to be a fund there. The key there for the public to know is if we end up having to bond those funds for whatever reasons, maybe it's the state's fault, but we have to bond them. Even when they reimburse us, they will not reimburse us for the interest that we lose. And once we bond it, it's 20 years. You can't pay it off early. So it's really good news, actually, that we can kick that can at least one more year, but we should plan for it, right?
Reconciliation that's on the last page of the budget. But there, they list what is PAYGO for FY26. PAYGO is a slang term for money that you take out of your general fund to pay for capital work.
Okay. So you didn't borrow it.
Yeah.
And you gave me, off camera, you gave me a great example, right? I'm talking about buying a piece of property.
Yeah, I bought a lot one time next to my house.
Okay.
As it turned out, I had the money to pay the full price. I didn't have to go borrow.
For at least the land.
Yeah. I probably could have gotten a mortgage, but
Yeah.
I decided not to.
Okay.
So that's the difference. Paygo
So
is
Paygo
taking
is
it out
like-
of your pocket.
It's like savings
Yeah.
that you're using on a project that if you didn't have the money, you would have to go borrow. the
Right.
money.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's a good way to look at it. Yeah. So anyway, it's listing 16 million in Paygo. Now, in the initial capital improvement plan that was turned in December, the Paygo was only 9.6 million. So that is a pretty significant difference. That's about a 7 million,
7 million,
increase.
And this is
Now-
off of the county executive CIP plan that she
Well,
submitted.
it's in the proposed budget.
Yeah.
Yes, hasn't been adopted yet by the council. Won't
Yeah.
be.
And
for
even
a
the
while.
initial one wasn't adopted.
No,
by the
that's right.
council.
It's still pending.
So it only changed on
Yeah.
the executive's plan.
So at the very least, what has been proposed in the CIP needs to be revised.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't agree.
And on the Paygo,
Now-
on the capital projects that she has proposed coming out of Paygo, there's 28 different projects.
Well, there's a bunch of them, and many of them are fairly small amounts. But the thing that jumped out at me, and you may remember at the council meeting on Tuesday, there was discussion about dredging
Yes.
and what we need to do, and particularly the Sharps Point
Yeah.
project. That was in the original CIP at, I think it was 4.1 million.
Okay.
That's now 7.5 million.
Okay.
So that's gone up. The others may have changed too. I haven't gone through every item.
There's one other item on there that I'd like more answers to, and I'm not sure if the county council had the wrong information but the director of finance, Pam Olin, said she would get more information. There's only 1.2 million in that Sharps Point fund to remove those spoils. They asked for and received 2.3 million, but none of the money in the last 4 years has been spent, and maybe even longer. So it's just odd to me that we've been budgeting to do this. One, the work hasn't been done over the years, and now when we're in an emergency situation, we're gonna spend 2.3 million out of the savings account, as you say, and yet the 1.2 million's going to just sit there.
That's the way it sounded on Tuesday.
Yeah.
That, for example, the
It doesn't seem like a
7.5
very
yeah.
conservative thing to do to me.
Well, the only thing, I think there was some discussion of why they needed to keep it, and I can't speak to the merits of that because I'm not technically inclined that way.
I plan on asking more questions about that.
But anyway, the long and the short of it is the 16 million that's now Paygo is much more than what the original CIP was that was just a few months ago. It was turned in. So those are things that you want to look at.
So the public even should know, because this could be a paving project in your neighborhood. This could be a water tower in your town. This could be a lot of things, or it could be some wasteful spending that we don't know yet. There's not been a lot of.
Well, you can look at
vetting.
you can look at the projects. I mean, none of them jump out to me as being wasteful, but I don't know. I mean, I'd have to look at more closely. But and the dredging needs to be done. I mean, from an economic standpoint.
Oh, I would agree
The
there.
interesting thing about it is, to me, on the dredging and why we've just gotten into this, is why it's taken so long.
I agree.
We actually apparently they do the dredging of the river in 3 cycles,
Yeah.
3 portions on a 3-year rotation. But we missed the last rotation.
We've missed the last really 2. They said we haven't been dredged
Yeah.
in 7 years.
Right.
And I do want the folks out there in the Sharps Point neighborhood to understand something. The county council this past Tuesday, at the request of the executive's office, agreed to fund $2.3 million to remove almost 400,000 cubic yards of material out of Sharps Point, 60,000 or 30,000 trucks, which means if a truck's got to go down your neighborhood and back out, that's 60,000 trucks. That's going to happen between now and October. So about 180 days, divide that into 60,000 trips, and that's what's coming to a neighborhood near you. And this is what happens when one county government doesn't spend the money adequately over time, and then also, once again, doesn't explain to a neighborhood, hey, this is what's coming down. I mean, do we have to do it? Yes. But if you live down Camden Avenue, Riverside Drive,
I'm pretty close to it.
yeah, hey, don't let your kid play outside. And
Who says the executive never gave me anything?
Well, you didn't get noticed, that's for sure.
That's true.
But I think that for the public, you're not just talking raises. They talked about there's going to be a 3% cost of living or 2% cost of living adjustment and a 3% step up for all county employees as an average. I think a lot of us agree that probably a 5% increase is probably barely keeping up with inflation. But again, if you have a problem with this in July, it's not going to do any good. You've got to be there in the May and the early June meetings, correct?
And you might also want to relate that salary increase to the Board of Ed, because that doesn't, their salaries come out of their budget. But the overage that they've asked for above maintenance of effort, it's a total of about 8%. Now, 3% of that is based on additional enrollment.
Yeah,
the
right.
enrollment's gone up, so
Right, yeah.
They have to
under
do
the
that.
MOA goes up by
Yeah.
3%.
The
The
MOA,
other
yeah.
the other 5% is 3% of it is for inflation, because MOE does not reflect inflation.
No.
It's just a level amount per student.
Right.
And then the other 2% is for special projects.
And one aspect that hasn't been decided, even if the county council does agree for the extra spending, is whether or not it's going to be a one-time thing, which means that technically they don't have to do it again next year,
yeah.
or if they do make it permanent, the MOE, the maintenance of effort, does slide up and stay there at that point. So, either one of you, is there a burning question that you feel like before the budget gets approved in mid-June that needs to be answered? I have one, but
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to know how we're going to look at this for 2027. Are we going to continue to underestimate income? Are we going to still have public hearings where the executive stands up with the finance director and says, we can't count on income tax revenue, even though the trends say much differently? And she even said at the April 15th meeting that we're always 18 months in arrears anyway, so we have an idea.
Well, and related to that too is it seems like because we have short-term good news on the budget, that justifies the delay on the information that we're getting.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the response that someone in the administration would say is, well, yeah, we know it's late, but look how good it is. Well, okay, but what if we were $5 million below where we needed to be?
Yeah.
What if we didn't have a surplus?
What if we look like Annapolis?
Again, it's always, look, it's going to rain. The question is it going to rain tomorrow or in 2 weeks?
How about you, Bob?
Well, what I'd like to see is I'd like to see the council spend a lot more time than they normally do when they have their work sessions on the budget. They bring in people from the departments, and they really need to get into the weeds and not just accept everything on face value.
Maybe and this is one thing I would side with Director of Finance Pam Olin. She brought up submitting the questions in advance of the work session so that she could have the answers. And I do think that that's a valid point. I've worked with many boards in my various roles in my career, and nothing's worse than coming up and having what would be seemingly an easy answer to discern, but you need to be in front of your records just to get the answer, and then it's like somebody wants to put you on the spot. All right, well, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
So in our final segment today, we're going to invite in Joe Schiaffino from the city of Salisbury, and we want to take some time to really talk about Board of Ethics, their representation, and the role of not just city government, but also county government, and also as it pertains to planning and zoning. These are all very hot topics in both the city with density and the county with biodiesel refineries. So when we come back, Dr. Venosa and I will sit down with him and
You're going to have two
Joe.
handsome Joes, both from Staten Island.
Well, how about three handsome Joes?
Okay, but
And
all right.
one of them's from the Eastern Shore of Maryland.
What did Meatloaf sing? 2 out of 3 ain't bad?
Oh, no, I think 1 out of 3 is pretty good. So stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Open Agenda. I'm your host, Joe White. I wanted to take some time to tie in the city government and the county government because they're in the process of separating their planning and zoning in order to talk about some of the works in that area and maybe even some of the issues we should make sure are addressed. I brought in a special guest, Joe Schiaffino. Say it right, Joe?
Yes.
All right. From Salisbury, and Dr. Joe Venosa still here with us. Thank you.
Both Staten Island guys.
Yeah.
That's right.
Hey.
So you got the 3 Joes, for whatever that's worth. So Joe, you're a resident of Salisbury.
Yes.
You have experience living in New York and Pennsylvania. You've seen lots of different government techniques.
Yeah.
You've even been a council person before, right?
Yeah, 8 years.
Yeah, and vice president too.
Vice president for 3 of them. Yep.
You've been very active with the Salisbury city government, And I wanted to get a sense for some of the, you've raised a lot of awareness on social media about some concerns, and we are going through the process right now separating planning and zoning, county and city, which have been combined for almost 20 years. What are some of the things you think that the folks out there need to make sure they understand before this happens later this summer?
Well, based on my experience in Pennsylvania, I was actually the council liaison to the Planning Commission. And we're going to need 5 to 7 volunteers for the Salisbury Planning and Zoning Commission. And in this day and age, it's pretty difficult to get volunteers. There's a lot of time involved. For example, the Central Business District zoning issue, that took a lot of hours, a lot of time that people may not be willing to give up. My recommendation would be that there should be some kind of compensation for these planning commission people that we're going to put in place in Salisbury.
Well, and you say that, and that's to make sure also too that we're getting people who are representative of the whole community and not someone just with special interest who maybe isn't making a stipend but has some other axe to grind.
Absolutely.
Who has a closed
Absolutely.
agenda as opposed to an open one.
Yeah.
And again, the Planning and Zoning Commission members, they're constrained by the law. They can't go rogue.
Okay.
So that's a safeguard in place.
So, Joe, I mean, you and we've covered the current Planning and Zoning Commission. In fact, we were just talking in a recent episode about some of the comments directed from folks from the Greater Salisbury Commission, or the Greater Salisbury Committee. Yeah.
Pretty much.
One of those Freudian slips, I guess. But what's your concern with the really keeping the ethics on the up and up when we're doing the separation for both the county and the city?
Well, there's two things. I think one, just in principle, it should probably be a situation where the county system and the city system mirror each other as much as possible. Obviously, there's some differences, but one of the things that I was concerned about that we've talked about in the community over the last few days was the proposal of the county executive regarding this new system for the county planning and zoning would have given her office basically exclusive power to hire and remove commission members.
Well, now you say that. Now, the county council still has a lot of say in how this is going to get set up, and I'm sure they're not going to allow
Correct.
that.
I believe they will be the necessary check and balance, but that was the proposal that was emanating from the executive's office. So, I'm sorry.
Well, let's look down one other rabbit hole there.
Sure.
Let's talk about the ethics side of this. Okay, so we just saw, and we're talking about county for a second. The county council just appointed independent legal counsel for the Board of Ethics.
Yes.
Planning and zoning really deals with that.
Exactly.
So, Joe, I want to ask you, like, how does that, as you're seeing this process unfold, and they're gonna unwind these two committees.
Right.
They're not shutting either one of them down, but they're separating them. How does that make you feel as far as on the ethics side of things?
Well, I think it's a good idea, first of all, to separate the county and the city.
Okay.
All right? That in itself is good. Ethically, we have ethics commissions. There's a county one and there's a city one. And I had done some research into this issue when I learned that the county was separating the solicitor. So instead of using the county solicitor also for the ethics commission, which is a blatant conflict of interest in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay. When I saw that, I decided to look into the issue a little deeper, and I discovered, well, Salisbury has the same issue.
Okay.
Right.
I looked at surrounding counties, and it appears to be a common occurrence throughout Maryland where municipality or county solicitor also is the solicitor of the Ethics Commission.
Right.
And it strikes me as a protection racket
Yeah.
for the elected officials.
Right.
So what you're saying, and what was factual about the county government up until just a couple months ago, was that the same representative who's representing, say, the city council, or in the county's case, the county council, the county as a whole, was also the legal representative for the ethics board.
Correct.
So if you ran into an ethics issues with the planning and zoning, these are new people.
Right.
The same person who's representing that entity also represents the ethics commission.
As it's set up right now,
Yeah.
yes.
Only in the city now, because the county
Correct.
is own.
Correct.
So Joe, really that's a lot to swallow, right? So what is it we're asking folks out there to gain a little knowledge of?
Well, essentially, and I think, and this applies to both the county and the city, right, is that one of the real red flags with not having a situation where there's a separation is it leaves whoever the attorney is who is working for the municipality or the county in a real position where there's a massive, as you said, a massive conflict of interest, and it really stifles the ability, or at least it could, of citizens to get a fair hearing if there are clear political and even economic actors who are pushing a particular agenda. And so, hypothetically, right, if because let's take this issue and let's apply it just to the city, right? Let's take this issue that it's now being devolved, and let's say that we're going to have a situation where, but let's say you had an issue that you brought to the attention of the commission, and it involved the mayor. Mm-hmm. How would this current process look in terms of possible concerns?
Well, what's interesting is that the whole process is confidential, so the public wouldn't even be aware of it. All right, but the person who brings the complaint, they, as a member of the public, they may not feel they're getting a good shake because the solicitor for the mayor is also the solicitor for the ethics commission.
Right.
So that's a conflict of interest right there. And it also puts that solicitor in a very compromised position.
Right.
Because I was either hired by, but I definitely work for the mayor and the council.
Yeah.
And now I got to agree with a recommendation
you're,
that they violate,
Yeah, I mean, you could make the argument that their own job security could be on the line. And this is why when the Ethics Commission was reformed for the county by the county council, they wanted to create a separation because the solicitor essentially serves at the discretion of the executive now, which means, if I don't agree with what the madam executive wants, I could be out of a job or I could be removed.
Well, it was interesting because the county executive vetoed that legislation at first.
Yeah, sure.
Went back to the county council, and it passed 6-1.
No, 7.
Oh, 7
7-0. Thank you,
right.
Councilman Wynn. Yeah.
But Joe Schiaffino, we're talking about city politics, and again, this isn't about Randy Taylor.
Right.
It could be about any of the city council. It could be about the council president. I mean,
absolutely,
it could be about any of them.
Absolutely.
So right now, you're saying in the city council government, mayor, city council president, the other 4 council members, if you have an ethics complaint, that complaint is going to be heard not publicly and by the same legal representative that represents the city and hired that representative as a legal counsel, right?
Exactly. And another issue that the public doesn't know, the Ethics Commission, they could be members of an Ethics Commission that are personal friends with the mayor or someone on council.
Yeah.
We don't know that.
This has been a recurring concern. I can say, just being a local citizen and having moved in these circles, there's been long-standing concerns that certain members of the Ethics Commission have very close relationships to other elected officials. In fact, that's often how they are asked to serve.
Well, so we'll circle this back to the planning and zoning, because that's really where we started, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if we have this problem with the Ethics Commission now we feel like we've solved it in the county, at least taking a step forward.
Yes, definitely.
Still have work to do in the city,
Yeah.
at least by our opinion.
Yeah.
But if we separate the planning and zoning, and all we end up doing is setting up that commission in the same way the Ethics Commission is set up, we end up with the same conflict of interest, correct?
Potentially, yes.
We're doubling down on it.
Yeah.
So, and we've been very critical of the Greater Salisbury committees. It seems like they already know what the plan is.
Yeah.
Before the plan, when we covered the planning and zoning, the text amendment back in November.
Yeah.
Chip DeShiel, who's the president, or the chair of planning and zoning, They already had a script out. It was hours and hours of public testimony, followed by a scripted version of
A preset
of pre-
response and vote. Yeah.
and no discussion.
No, and
And
actually,
it got passed,
right,
doubling the
and,
density.
and Councilman Holloway even spoke to this issue at the last county council meeting, where he basically said, you have, at least within the context of the Greater Salisbury Committee, which has, I believe, over 100 paying dues members, but you really have 4 or 5 people that are actually running it with a particular sort of angling agenda, and if you have them or any group that has that kind of influence on these commissions, you're really putting the public interest on the back burner.
All right, so there's one other side of this public interest I want to delve into. So let's take this Randy Taylor example we're going with, and we're picking on him because we don't have a problem with him. But
Right.
so let's just say Joe here, this Joe, has a beef with Randy Taylor. He's filed an ethics complaint. He can't speak to it, right?
Right.
It's heard by the same legal representative that works for the mayor or the city council president or the county or the city council. It gets turned down. What is your options at that point?
Your option is to either just drop it, or you can appeal it to circuit court.
Okay.
Now, if you appeal it to the circuit court, the law is kind of ambiguous. I believe at that point the confidentiality becomes moot because
It's a legal proceeding.
the legal
It's a legal
proceeding
proceeding,
is a public record. So anybody can see that, and then they would see an appeal or, of the ethics commission, and what's that? So that cat would be out of the bag at that point.
But that's not free, right?
Well, that was my next point, right? Like, John Q. Citizen here.
Yeah,
If they want to push it, they're gonna have to pay out.
yeah, it's like $65,
Okay.
but still, it's still
you
out
gotta
of
get a
pocket.
lawyer.
You
goes
probably,
to court,
yeah. I mean, the average person isn't going to be able to handle himself. in court.
If you don't file the appeal in court, are you allowed to talk about it publicly?
It doesn't look that way.
Okay.
So
is this
I would
week in November?
recommend anybody who files an ethics complaint to be on the safe side.
Right.
So we're going to watch this unrolling of the separation of the planning and zoning roll out for the next 4 to 5 months, and likely even longer. We're also going to be getting a good glimpse of just how the county does with independent legal counsel for their ethics committee. What I'd love to ask you, Joe, maybe would you come back in a few months and we can revisit where this process is, maybe sometime this summer, and give us an update on what you're seeing, because you're very active with the city council, and I think that's a very positive thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks. Yeah. Awesome.
Thanks for watching this segment of Open Agenda.
I know what I'm doing, man.